Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kelly Nielsen, and I'm the Vice President of Insights and Analytics here at BDSA. I'm thrilled to be here to speak with everyone today for our webinar, Winning in Store, and talk about details about our upsell, cross-sell, and promotional tactics. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be covering a lot of information. We're first going to start by just giving a very quick recap of the overall industry. And then we want to dive in and focus on how we go from understanding this high-level macro understanding of the industry and bring that into really tactical pieces and components to help you win in store. And then we're going to close out with some exciting BDSA predictions on what we can expect for upcoming 420. As we're going through, there is a comment box. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. We'll try to get to a couple at the end, but we also do have a lot of content to go through today. Okay, so before we jump into maybe some of these specifics about the overall market recap, I know there's a lot of folks on the phone that may not have the fullest understanding of what BDSA does. So I want to give a really quick recap. That our goal is to provide the complete view of the global cannabinoid market. And that means understanding what's going on today and being able to project what's going to happen in the future. And we have three key components to our overall solution suite that as we're going through this, you will see information from each of these peppered throughout. But to provide a little bit of context, the first is our retail sales tracking. This is our analysis of really understanding what is going on in the marketplace today. What is selling through retail stores? What are the products? What are the brands? What are the different product attributes? Where is it selling? When is it selling? At what price point? And right now, today, we have retail sales tracking available in 8 specific states, as well as Canadian provinces. But I actually have some news to share that we will be rolling out more states in the near future. So more to come on the next page there. The second is our market forecast. So this is really an understanding of what we expect to happen in the overall cannabinoid market, both in the United States and Canada, as well as globally. And what's really exciting here is that first, we project out to the next 5 years. So we're able to provide some really cool perspective around where we expect the industry to go. But we also provide a level of granularity. So within the United States and Canada, we actually get down to the state or province level, and we also get down to the category level to understand and help organizations understand what's going to happen in these markets and how can they best be prepared for growth. And the third bucket is consumer insights. So this is a consumer survey that we release twice a year in order to understand what is the shifting perception of cannabis in the United States and Canada. And so we're going into these markets, we're understanding who is the consumer, or what are attitudes of the cannabis market. So we're identifying consumers and non-consumers. We're able to size different industries, different categories. We're understanding consumer behavior, consumption patterns, purchase habits, etc. I think about consumer insights as really being able to provide rich color around why are we seeing what's going on. And what's really cool about consumer insights is that this is something that we've been doing for several years now. We actually recently completed wave 7. So we have a lot of trending information to be able to show how the cannabis, how perceptions toward cannabis continue to evolve. And so I mentioned that we have some exciting news to share as it pertains to additions to our solution suite. And so what we're looking at on this page is our roadmap for new tools that we know we've been getting a lot of questions about some of these things. So we're really excited to share. And the first that actually is hot off the press is going to be launching in the next couple of days. A couple things. The first is basket analytics. We're going to be spending a lot of time today talking about basket analytics because this is a solution and a tool that really enables manufacturers and retailers alike to understand what's going on in those consumer transactions and how to optimize for growth. So we're going to be spending a lot of time on that. We're also releasing new retail sales tracking data in Florida and Michigan at the category level. So really exciting stuff there. And then we have even more to come over the next couple of months. So we have more information coming around CBD and wholesale pricing. We will also be releasing Pennsylvania and North and South California retail sales tracking information. And actually something I'm going to tease today, which I'm personally very excited about, is thinking about brand availability and item velocity. So more to come there. And then as we look through the rest of the year, as we look into the fall, we're focusing more on things like media activation and financial services and solutions to really help address questions in that particular space. As always, if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out to me or any of your BDSA contacts. And so since I'm going to be spending time talking about basket analytics today, I just want to give a quick overview of what we're evaluating when we're talking about basket analytics, because this is all about evaluating transactions that come in from our retail partners to be able to provide context of what's going on in any given market. We're evaluating things like how many transactions are coming through the store and what does that look like as time goes on? What are some of the trends that we're seeing? What's in the basket from a category perspective, from a brand perspective, and how do those things interplay? And then also thinking about things like pricing. How many units, how many, at what price points are going into this? And so if we have all of this understanding, it really enables retailers and manufacturers to do a couple key things. The first is just maximize your store and or brand sales because you understand more about the consumer and the shopper behavior. It also allows the enablement of creating promotional activities or partnerships and thinking about things like cross-selling because you understand the interactions across brands or interactions across categories, and also upselling. So something we're going to look at today is, for example, what happens and what does it mean and how should you strategically think about a situation where the overall basket size is down and the number of items in a basket are down, but the average price per unit is up. What does that mean for you? And ultimately, all of this also allows the development of strong sales presentations, understand where your brand stands relative to the competition. And without further ado, I would like to jump on into a quick reminder of when we're jumping into the cannabis industry here, what is going on? It's definitely been quite the hectic market in the past couple months. So I want to ground us in the overall size of the industry. So first, what you're looking at here is our global legal cannabis forecast, and I have this specifically here for our US and Canada medical and adult use markets. And I think the first thing I want to call out to the left-hand side of the screen is that the US legal cannabis market closed the year at about $17.6 billion. And just to put that into context, that was about a 48% increase year over year. A lot of big traction going on, and something you'll hear me talk about as we go through this section is where that growth is coming from, because it's really coming from two places. The first is market expansion. So in 2019, we saw new states like Michigan and Illinois really come into their own, so it contributed a lot of growth there. But we also see an expansion of consumers. So the penetration of consumers who are using cannabis is continuing to grow, even in the most mature markets. And so that's really exciting. And based on that, and that trend we're seeing with new states coming online, new markets, and that continued development and increase in penetration in consumers, we expect continued growth through 2026. So within the US market specifically, we expect the size of the market to be about $41.1 billion by 2026. And the Canadian market really be driven by adult use reaching about $6.1 billion. And when it comes to markets, you see the top 5 US state markets over there on the right-hand side of the screen: California, Colorado, Florida, New York, and New Jersey. New York is definitely a hot button issue right now, so I definitely have a slide on that to make sure that we at least cover off on it in this conversation. And so I mentioned in the previous slide that about consumption continues to expand. And just to provide some perspective, when we're talking about fully legal states today, about 3/4 of adults are bought into consuming cannabis. That means that they're either already consumers, so about 43%, or they are open to consuming cannabis even if they don't today. And that's about 29-30% of the population. And so that's really exciting because that we continue to see this expand every time we're conducting this survey. And to bring this to life, I mentioned that this consumer penetration continues to grow even in the most mature markets. So what you're looking at here, level 1 states are what we consider those fully legal states. Level 2 states are medical only states. But whether we're looking in aggregate at total level 1 or level 2, or going deeper into, say, the Canadian market, or new or pretty established markets like Massachusetts, California, Colorado, we're seeing that past 6 months consumers continues to expand, and that's really exciting. I do have to give a shout out to Colorado, where the penetration of past 6 month consumers has hit close to 50%. So 48% of consumers claim to be past 6 month consumers of cannabis, and so that penetration is, relatively high, especially when you think or put that into context against something, say, the alcohol beverage industry, where penetration tends to teeter around 60 to 65%. So really exciting there. And so I mentioned I would remiss to go through an overview of what's going on in the industry without commenting on New York, because fresh off the presses this week is that New York has legalized marijuana for adult use. And so what does that mean? We've identified that New York is expected to be the 4th biggest market in the next couple of years. And so right now, within 2021, it is medical only sales. We're expecting it to be about $150 million. And I want to call that out because our expectation is that even though they legalized adult use cannabis this week, we expect that product will be available around this time next year, that it'll take some time for that state to come online. So that's why that 2021 size of industry, about $150 million, which is still up from about $111 million this past year. But from here, we expect to see really substantial growth. We expect that first year to be about $7.5 million and just continue to expand up to about $2.5 billion by 2026. And again, that puts it as the 4th biggest market for cannabis in the United States. And one key thing that New York has going for it is that 2/3 of the population in that state already either consume or are open to consuming cannabis. And so if you look at that percentage of acceptors, folks who aren't purchasing today, but will be open to, the market really is prime for growth and penetration. Okay, so now let's jump into all of the nitty gritty. Really excited because coming out of this particular this prior section, we can see that there's a lot of growth in this market. We know that there's a lot of traction. We know that there's a lot of momentum. And so how can you or in general brands and retailers alike capitalize on the traction that we're seeing in the market with really tactical in-store activation? And I want to start by saying that we recognize that there's a lot of different strategies to succeed in the marketplace. And so what you are looking at on this slide is the top brands in the total United States market that is covered by our retail sales tracking analysis. And what's really interesting here is those top 3 brands, the top three brands in the entire country. So if you look at Cresco, Rhythm, Verano, the approach there is really a multi-state operation, and these products are available in multiple states, and they've had success in breaking into these markets and really being able to expand their footprint into those multiple markets. However, you still see a lot of brands on this list that have been successful or make the top list by only being available in a single state or single market. So Raw Garden, for example, is only available in California. Or if you look down this list, things like Timeless Vapes, which is only available in Arizona. And then you get into things like Sierra Naturals, Pacific Stone, heavy hitters. And so as a big portion of what we're going to talk about in this strategy is thinking about where to distribute, how to distribute. And multi-state and single state, there's different dynamics that need to be taken into consideration in those circumstances. Another component is category expansion. So as we think about brand development, how can brands think about synergies either across categories and equities and understanding their consumer to expand and find white space? And this brings us to the primary topic of our discussion today, which is all about winning in store. And so we're going to cover 6 what I'm calling lessons about what we've learned about the cannabis industry, really diving into retail sales tracking, the consumer information, our size of industry understanding, and basket analysis to understand what it takes to win. So we're going to cover a couple key things. The first is about making sure that you understand when consumers are engaging in your category. It's been a weird couple of years. What does actual seasonality look like in this industry, and how can you capitalize on it? Understand what is driving changes, because different changes in the marketplace require a tailored strategy. Recognize the importance of availability. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we're going to talk about distribution and its importance there. Understanding your consumer, unpacking cross-category dynamics, which whether you're a retailer or manufacturer are really important. And then thinking about not just maybe month over month, but what's actually happening on a day-by-day level within dispensaries. And so I want to start by thinking about this high-level perspective of understanding when consumers are engaging in your category. And so what you're looking at here is a seasonality evaluation pre-2020, so pre-COVID-19, pre-lockdown. And at that time, we actually had a pretty robust analysis across states that had pretty developed cannabis markets. So markets like California, Colorado, Oregon, Nevada. And when we take a look at what's going on throughout the year, you see that there's a couple key peaks. And the first I want to call out is in March, which for many of these states became spring break time. And that's really when you start to see the first uptick in engagement after the winter holidays. But then as time goes on, in states, especially those that have more pronounced seasons and probably have more seasonal tourism versus all year-round tourism, such as Colorado and Oregon, you're seeing more dramatic peaks during the summer between those months of June to September. If you look at a state like Nevada, which is the yellow line, I actually found this pretty fun to look at, that it has its own unique seasonality curve, likely because the tourism schedule is a little bit different when you look back at that state in particular. And so when we think about that particular time frame, what's really important to also understand is that within those months where we're seeing a lot of those peaks, we have some of the busiest times of the year within that time frame, because we know that folks are purchasing cannabis more frequently or have bigger baskets during some of these holidays that happen during that time frame. So one I want to call out, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about here at the end of our conversation, is 420. But just to provide a sneak peek, we typically see that on and around the days of 420, that daily sales can be 2 to 3 times higher than normal. It differs a little bit by market, but really important to have that context to understand how you should be thinking about your brand strategy and in-store strategy. We also have holidays such as the 4th of July and the days that round there, or Dab Day, Labor Day, and then to a lesser degree, Memorial Day. But each of these is seeing some sort of peak and uptick in consumer engagement in the cannabis space. And so all of this is thinking about a normal year. And so I want to just pause for a second and say, like, okay, where are we? Because I don't think we can continue a conversation about seasonality and engagement without acknowledging that 2020 was not a normal year when it comes to consumer engagement in the category in the space. And so what you are looking at here is our overall seasonality index, looking at 2020 specifically. And, the first thing to call out is obviously April and March really saw a dramatic decrease in overall sales because of stay-at-home orders that were implemented. And certain states were hit more negatively than others, namely Massachusetts, which completely shut down a wide range of retailers, and Nevada, which really suffered more from the lack of tourism compared to other states. But what is really positive is that we continue to see steady growth in all states starting in June. And then we saw an additional little bump around the December holidays, which is normal. We do tend to see that Thanksgiving weekend and Christmas and New Year's weekends do tend to be some of the highest sales times for the industry. So all really positive. And all of this really led to substantial growth across the board for several of our key retail sales tracking states. So Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, all up double digits, which is really exciting, right? But the one thing, or this actually brings me to my next lesson, because if your growth is coming from things like more transactions at any given retailer, bigger baskets, are people just putting more items in a basket or spending more per basket? Do they have fewer units or more units? Are the items lower priced or higher priced? Understanding these things can help you, again, either retailers or manufacturers, really tailor a strategy to grow in these particular stores. And so what you're looking at on this page, and I'm really excited about this because this is the first view you are getting of our basket analysis. But what you're looking at on this page is two different markets. So I wanted to select a market that is considered more established, so Colorado, and a market that is new, so Illinois, new to the adult use landscape in 2020. And what you're looking at here, the black bar is the dollars per basket or overall basket size. And then the purple bar is the average daily transactions. And so what's really interesting here is that you see in both of these states that in Q1 and Q2 of 2020, we saw relatively lower overall daily transactions, but higher overall basket size, especially in Q2, which really isn't that surprising because that's when folks were starting to stock up and really the end of Q1 and beginning of Q2, stock up, stay at home orders, etc. After that, as we get into Q3, as summer went on, we begin to see a steep drop off in the overall size of the basket and an increase in the average daily transactions. This is when folks were getting more comfortable being able to go back to stores and those sorts of things. But what has been great is we have continued to see fairly consistency as we come into Q1 of this year. One thing I do want to call out is we have seen this similar trend across nearly all US states and Canadian provinces. But this is really important in understanding this because this is what allows you to leverage a strategy tailored to this consumer behavior. So let's look at Colorado for a second. So to put those numbers on the prior page into more specificity here, in Colorado, when we compare Q4 of 2020 versus Q4 of 2019, we saw that the average daily transactions were up 48%, but the average basket size and number of items were down, but the average price per item was up. So how do you unpack all of this different movement? And the first thing I want to call out is that if you're thinking, let's start with transactions. If you're thinking about transactions being nearly 50% higher year over year, that has a couple of implications. If you're a retailer, it means that it's all about figuring out how to bring consumers or shoppers, to your store versus competitive stores. And you have to be prepared for traffic, whether that means from a logistical standpoint, having the right amount of bud tenders and a right amount of folks to be able to help folks check out and ask questions and answer questions. You need to be prepared for that. But as a manufacturer, you want to be where the shoppers are, and you want to make sure that you are leveraging that heightened transaction, that heightened traffic, those heightened transactions, in order to drive awareness and brand recognition for your brands. It's an opportunity to get your brand in front of more people. And then let's take moving down this list as we think about what's in the basket and this trade overall basket size, number of items, and price per item. If you're a retailer and you're thinking probably a couple of different things. The first is, how can I drive basket size and quantity? And so there's probably some promotional tactics that should be considered in order to either bulk discounting or cross-category promotion in order to buff up the size of that overall basket. Also make sure that you're considering optimizing price tiers within your store. This is all about store assortment, making sure that you're not leaving money on the table and making sure that that you have price tiers at a range of different price points because people are willing to pay more per price per item for the right item. If you're a manufacturer, it means you want to capture attention fast because people are putting fewer items in their basket. You want to make sure that your item is one of them. So you want to capture their attention. You want to be relevant to them. And then there could be an opportunity for potentially cross promotion. So thinking about if there's either other categories or other brand partners that you could partner with in order to drive bundles, or think about how you can optimize that overall pricing and really understand consumer willingness to pay for any given item. So really unpacking this can help make sure that your overall strategy, be it brand or retailer, is tailored to that shopping behavior. I also want to call out that magnitude matters. And so let's come back to Colorado versus Illinois. So in those past couple slides, we started with daily average transactions and basket size. And we saw a similar trend, right? After Q2, we saw daily transactions go down, and we saw basket size, or excuse me, we saw daily transactions go down and basket size go other way around. Let me go back to the slide to make sure I'm speaking about this appropriately. Yes, okay, basket size decreased, number of transactions increased. But one thing you might not have noticed right off the bat is that if you actually compare the Colorado and Illinois markets on things like the number of daily transactions and basket size, they are dramatically different. So the number of daily transactions is 2 times as high in Illinois. It's about 2.5, the basket size is about 2.5 times bigger. But the number of dispensaries is dramatically different. So Colorado has over 500 open dispensaries, whereas Illinois has fewer than 100. And so the overall size of the market, despite higher daily transactions and basket size in Colorado, is substantially higher. And this is really important because for 2 reasons. The first is if you are a retailer and you're thinking about expanding markets, really important to understand how these different markets behave and react and what is your competition. From a brand perspective, this means that the more dispensaries there are, the more important it is to get your product in more managements, more stores. Because this brings us to lesson 3, which is drive availability wherever possible. I understand that there's some states out there where, fully vertically integrated, a lot harder to distribute your product across the board. But where at all possible, we see direct relationship between overall brand sales and availability. And for anyone who comes from a consumer packaged goods background, I think from day one, it's drilled into your head that distribution is king. The cannabis industry is no different in this circumstance. And so what you're looking at on this page is the top Illinois chocolate brands, ranked from highest to lowest in terms of overall dollar sales. And we are rolling out a new availability metric where we will be able to put into context how available are these different brands relative to other brands in their category. And you can see here that those top 4 brands, Incredibles, Nature's Grace and Wellness, Encore, Kiva, all are the most widely distributed chocolate brands within the state. So distribution absolutely matters in the cannabis category. From here, what's really important to understand is your shopper and your consumer. Excuse me. So let's go back to Colorado for a second. We know that in Colorado, when we talk to consumers, 60% of consumers tell us that they prefer inhalable products. And we also know that those consumers who prefer inhalables are among the most involved consumers in the category because they're telling us 70% of them consume inhalables daily. They spend 43% more dollars per month, and they spend $15 more per trip. And so we know that they're a really involved consumer. But it's where it's really important to understand the need state of each of those different products because they may have different motivations when it comes to each of those specific product forms. For the #1 reported benefit for inhalables is to be relaxed and be mellow, whereas for topicals, it's to relieve pain. In edibles, it is to sleep better. And all of this information can really be leveraged in order to provide color and understand, again, that why behind what we're actually seeing in the market. And so what you're looking at here is by category basket size and penetration of those baskets, meaning how often is that basket occurring in the marketplace. And there's a couple things I want to call out. I also did include category share along the bottom. And so let's talk about this inhalable consumer who is the most involved and most dynamic involved consumer in the category. If you think about concentrates versus flower versus pre-rolls, each of these is bringing in substantial volume in different ways. So concentrates is a mix between high penetration of baskets, in addition to having among the highest basket size. So folks that are buying concentrates have higher overall basket sizes, which concentrates themselves tend to be among the more expensive product forms. Or things like flower, which is really overall we're seeing that basket penetration is substantially high. Where something like pre-roll, which still is able to demand 7% of the overall dollar share in the space, is really driven by the penetration of lower basket items. Really interesting to be able to dive into the category level. Just for reference, we can actually go deeper than this on categories as well. So we could break down edibles, looking specifically at beverages versus chocolates versus candy, etc. But this is really important to understand the category dynamics, because this allows you to manage your assortment and portfolio across categories. So the way to read this chart is from left to right. And so, for example, anytime concentrates is in a cart, 2% of those carts or baskets also involved consumers. They are not only opting into the edibles, or excuse me, the inhalable, that 14% or 10% of those baskets actually also include edibles. And understanding this cross-purchasing, cross-shopper behavior is really important, because if you are a retailer, this is the information that's going to allow you to have the right assortment. We can actually get down to the brand level, so we can understand if consumers have brand X in their basket, what other brands are they buying? But it gives you the opportunity to have the right products on hand. It additionally gives you the opportunity to think about cross-promotion or in-store shelving. So what should the layout of your store look like to make sure that you have complementary products next to each other? And then if you're a manufacturer, this is all about white space and innovation opportunities, because you can begin to see where your brand and flow of what's going on week over or day over day within a week. And this to me is particularly interesting. And what you're looking at here is an index of sales to an average by day of the week. And so I think the first couple of things that I'll call out is that Friday and Saturday are by far the biggest dollar sales days of the week. Probably unsurprising to folks out there who are involved in the retail space. I think what's really interesting though is that Tuesdays of all days are the one that tend to underperform. So they tend to have sales of about 89% of the rest of the week. And when we take a look at what's driving that, so Friday and Saturday, you see a combination of higher traffic, higher transactions, and higher overall dollars per basket. But something else that is really interesting is that assortment matters, and assortment differs per week. So for example, in the Colorado market, of the different dollars sold, 19% of those are based on, or 19% of those come from edibles on a Friday, whereas only 12% of dollars come from edibles on a Tuesday. And so that means a couple of things. It means if you're a retailer, think about the assortment that you're bringing forward and making sure that you have product available different days of the week. If you are a manufacturer and you're thinking about how to get product to stores, really keep in mind of trying to get product in time for any sort of weekend rush as much as possible. Okay, so this actually wraps up our section around winning in store. So just as a really quick recap, thinking about identifying when consumers are engaging in your category. Again, think about that seasonality and think about those months or time of year within your market where there might be more people that are interested in consuming in the cannabis space. Understand what's driving changes. Is it higher basket size? Is it more baskets? Is it dollars per basket? Understanding that allows you to tailor your strategy. Recognize the importance of availability. Distribution matters even in the cannabis space. Make sure that you understand your shopper or your consumer in order to understand those motivations, because understanding those motivations allows you to unpack cross-category dynamics. And then again, consider this weekly ebb and flow of not just this macro level of year over year, month over month, but getting as nitty gritty as day over day. And so with all this said, I want to jump into some 420 predictions. And I want to first lay the groundwork of where we're coming from here. So what you're looking at on the left-hand side of the screen is our 2019 420 analysis. So we saw that dollar sales in 2019 in some states actually reached 3 times what a normal day would look like. But there's caveats to that. The first is that it was on a Saturday, which from our very last section, we know that being on a Saturday makes a much bigger difference potentially than even the holiday itself. And then it's also obviously pre-COVID. Pre-lockdown, we had the opportunity to have these outdoor engagements or be able to celebrate. But what's really interesting, and honestly, I did not expect to see this as much as we saw, because 2020, when we take a look at 420, first it was on a Monday, and then obviously it was at the height of lockdown across the country. Despite that, we still see pretty substantial uptick in the overall dollar sales versus an average April day. So versus an average April day, on the day of 420 itself, we see sales as high as about 2 times that of a normal day in April. But what is also exciting is because it was on a Monday, we saw growth throughout the weekend before. And so if you look at the 17th and 18th in particular, which are that Friday and Saturday leading up to 420, we see an increase across several markets. I think one call out that I will make sure to mention here is that it's not equal by state. And so if you look here where we saw the biggest increases, Maryland, Oregon, California, Colorado were all where we're seeing some of those biggest increases in sales around 420, especially or even in 2020. Whereas markets such as Nevada, which was hit pretty heavily from lack of tourism, and then a state like Illinois, which probably doesn't have as much of the deep-seated history associated with 420. When we take a look at those dates, though, we do tend to see that not only is the overall dollar sales increasing, it's coming from some interesting places. The first is that we're seeing this really come from an increase in the number of units sold. So we typically see about 25% more growth in unit sales over dollar sales. So for example, if you were to see about a 200% increase in dollar sales, we would expect to see about a 250 increase in unit sales. And part of the reason for that is that we do actually see a decrease in the average retail price over this time frame of about 15%. And that's really on account of promotion. So we know that during that time frame, retailers and manufacturers are planning price discounts, buy one, get one, sorts of promotions to build an overall basket. And we're seeing that come through in pricing. I think another thing that's really interesting about 420 of years past is that we did see similar trends in pricing and units in both 2019 and 2020. And so I think the implication there, or I'm sorry, one more slide before I get to the overall implication predictions, is taking a look at what we're seeing across categories. So typically, historically, we're seeing most categories impacted by 420 surges relatively similarly. So we're seeing substantial growth across your big categories, such as flour, concentrates, pre-roll, edibles. So whether you're a manufacturer or a retailer, I would say in this circumstance, be prepared and make sure your product is available, make sure that you have the right assortment in order to accommodate this sort of growth. And that brings us to our 420-2021 predictions. So the first thing I would say, I teed this up coming into this is like, do we actually think that 420 is going to show growth in 2021, especially because it's on a Tuesday this year? And we know that Tuesday is one of the lowest daily sales of the week. But if we learned anything from 2020, it's that folks are resilient and we still do expect to see growth and an uptick in sales and dollars and transactions around 420. However, we do expect it to start the weekend before. So the big days are probably actually going to be April 16 and 17, which are the Friday and Saturday before 420 this year. We expect that increase to be bigger than 2020. We are still in a pandemic. There are still social distancing orders in place, but activities are on the rise. So we do expect that increase to continue. We expect a higher impact in what we would consider to be those legacy states or those that are not negatively impacted by lack of tourism. So Nevada may not reach its former glory in these years, or currently that it hasn't had the opportunity to completely build back its tourism industry. And again, like I mentioned, we did not see a big uptick last year in Illinois, as big of an uptick this year either. Be prepared for those price discounts and increases in traffic, transactions, units. Make sure that you have product on hand to accommodate the demand. And when we talk about this product and assortment, make sure that you're thinking about all categories, because we see that the overall contribution to volume or overall contribution to sales is relatively in line with what we would consider fair share for each of those individual categories. And so with that, I hope you have found this extremely helpful. Thank you again so much for taking time to talk with me today on this. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to either me or your BDSA contact. We're excited about basket analysis, and we'll absolutely keep track on our predictions of 420. And let's see. Thank you all so much.